Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So today I got a fun video for you guys today because we're going to be talking about the rarest Resident Evil or Biohazard games out there that you've never played before. And I decided to talk about this because just recently Biohazard, the episode, was preserved and made playable for the first time ever, basically on the Kitai launcher, a Japanese feature phone emulation platform. But the reality is there are a lot of Resident Evil games that you probably never even knew existed that range in fun from kind of like B tier all the way up to just absolutely a vibe in all the best ways possible. So I want to be talking about 4 Resident Evil games today that absolutely are just probably something you've never played before. And before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But right off the top, we're taking a look at Resident Evil The Operations, which is definitely my favorite of these games we're going to be talking about on the videos. That's why I put it up front. You basically get bite-sized gaming pieces of Resident Evil goodness, and it takes place in the original mansion from the original Resident Evil. And interestingly, you are going to get some lore dumps, just a little bit, between levels, even though they are going to be in Japanese, so you'll have to do some machine translation yourself. But it's really fun to see the environment of the mansion here, with all of these different, kind of like, not mini-games, but mini-campaigns. Because basically all of the gameplay here is designed around the fact that this was cell phone gaming. Maybe you'd play for 5-10 minutes, complete a few missions, and then move on with your day because you got to work and you had to get off the train. And honestly, as far as the technical capabilities of all of these feature phones are concerned, I would say the missions here has the most Resident Evil feel. You even get that full 3D animation when you're actually going through the door. And this is just basically a tutorial area explaining how things work until you get into some of the deeper missions. I'm only showing you the beginning of these games so you can kind of get an idea of what they are and whether or not you might want to play them. But this room right here, absolutely iconic from the original Resident Evil, but you do see that there is another hallway there, so it's kind of based on sort of the remaster as well. It really is a fun mix of both the RE version that you played on PlayStation 1 as well as that GameCube remake. Leave me a comment down below and you tell me if you ever even heard of this game before. I would be very curious because I'm assuming I'm going to stump almost all of you with all the games in this video. But more Resident Evil is always fun, even though I don't know why I failed that mission by shooting the zombie. Now we're moving over to another game which is basically a first-person shooter with some of the weirdest and most stylized graphics you'll ever see coming out of Resident Evil. This is Resident Evil A.T.N, and it is a really fun time and just totally different than anything you've ever seen RE do. And even though there have been first-person shooters and even light gun games in the actual world, Assault the Nightmare just absolutely is a completely different vibe, and I kind of love what they're doing with this as well, because it kind of actually has a Game Boy Color vibe going on, even though it isn't running on the Game Boy Color, and it is a pseudo first-person shooter and also kind of a pseudo light gun game. But of course, you're not actually using a light gun, you're using a phone keyboard, or in this instance, the keyboard on your computer or gamepad via emulation. But I just love Assault the Nightmare for just how weirdly stylized it is. Kind of feels like a very rudimentary Beastbusters from SNK, but when these zombies get to the front of the screen and you kind of get that weird vibe going on, it just works. And you can pull up the instructions to understand how to shoot and reload as well, because it's going to take you a minute to get used to any of this stuff. Trust me, these games definitely aren't the classic Resident Evil, but that is a lot of fun, and this artwork just absolutely some of the most fun stuff I've ever seen in the Resident Evil universe. Yes, it's completely cartoony, but I think it definitely works. Leave me a comment down below and you tell me, is this something that looks visually interesting to you or not? And I kind of love how they animate, or kind of lack of animation in some respects. They kind of just show up as silhouettes in the background until they get closer. But this is just something that is perfect for cell phone gaming, or perfect for kind of going in and taking a deep dive into the very deep end of the Resident Evil or Biohazard franchise, because I'm assuming nobody knew this game ever existed, and if you did, do leave me that comment down below because I would be curious. And I just always have loved Resident Evil. I've been playing this since the original game came out on PlayStation 1, and I basically played every Resident Evil game since then from start to finish, minus Village, and the only reason I didn't finish that one was because unfortunately our 13-year-old corgi, when that game came out, had to be put to sleep because she was sick, so every time I play that game I just have a bad vibe. But the soundtrack on this one is great, even if I just bummed you out, and I'll be right back. I mean, sure, the air quote soundtrack really is just one sample looping over and over again, but it really is effective, kind of gives you a fun comedy horror vibe, and feels a little bit like a George Romero version of Resident Evil that we were supposed to get, but never actually got outside of commercial form. But now let's move into Resident Evil The Missions, which is basically going to be another version of the same game you saw off the top, but every single one of these 3D games has a completely different vibe, different environment, and basically different things to do within the game. And you'll see here, obviously we're Jill Valentine, but it is a different location than you'll see in the fourth game in this video. But there's just something about these pre-rendered backgrounds looking so good, with the kind of clunky, a little bit janky 3D models you get on something like a Japanese feature phone. It has a very particular vibe. And I totally understand this is not going to be for everyone, but it is video game esoteric after all, not video game common. And I love stuff like this because you get to find out that some of your favorite franchises of all time have dozens of entries that maybe you've never heard of before, because every single Resident Evil game that we're talking about here, as far as I can tell, obviously never came anywhere outside of Japan. You're not going to be able to play these on any sort of iOS or Android device unless you're using emulation. And again, if you want to check these things out, the link to Keytie Launcher is down below. It does take a little bit of setup, and if you want to see a setup guide, leave me a comment. But for the most part, if you know how to set up any emulator, you should be totally fine here. And getting inside this building, again, the graphics look stunning for what they are, especially if you're using this on a small screen like a cell phone. This would just be impressive back in the day. Just think of the type of games you were playing in the mid-2000s on cell phones here versus what Japan had. And because this was such a big genre of gaming, that's why you see stuff like 7 or 8 different Resident Evil games being available on Keytie Launcher, along with franchises like Bomberman, Ridge Racer, and basically every other big kind of franchise you've heard of out there. It is absolutely an entire world of gaming you've never experienced before, and definitely one I recommend you check out if you want to get into some of the really deep cuts. But as far as the missions is concerned, this might actually be another one of my favorites of the bunch. I know I said the Operation was probably my favorite, but I think that's just down to being in the original mansion from Resident Evil. Sure, these things have tank controls, sure you're going to have to relearn that motion if you haven't played it in a while, but you will definitely get there. And interestingly, it's one of the few Resident Evil games you don't have to push a button to walk up the stairs, it just automatically happens. But just navigating around in this environment is so much fun, and again, for fans of this franchise, the ones that want to play every piece of media out there, something like this is just giving you more of your favorite thing. And I kind of just love that. Just think to yourself, if you didn't know these games existed and you want to play something new in Resident Evil, even if it isn't the mainline entry Requiem, which isn't out as of the recording of this voiceover, then you get to actually find out that there's all these games that have all these characters you love and you've never seen before. It's kind of like finding out there's a new entry in one of your favorite movie franchises that you haven't watched, or a book in some sort of fantasy series that you didn't realize was an offshoot that you now get to go and read again. Like I said, these are not going to live up to mainline Resident Evil entries. This is definitely going to be inferior to even something like the original PlayStation 1 release, at least on a technical process and playing it on a keyboard. But there is still a lot of fun to be had, and for those diehard purists out there, the ones that love Resident Evil and Biohazard like me who've been playing since the original release, you're quickly going to discover that this is a situation where more is more, not less is more. Give me more Resident Evil, let me be in that world more often, give me things that I never knew existed, and just let me play around with them. And even though I have known about these games for some years now, the next game and last game on this video is one that just recently got dumped and I did a video on that nobody could play before this. This is Biohazard the Episodes, and I would say it's maybe the most far along in the development process feel of any of the games I'm talking about today, because you get a lot more menu, a lot more artwork, and maybe a lot more in-depth story here. Because in the previous menu you saw that basically there's only a couple icons and that was it. Here you get a lot more going on. And from a preservation standpoint alone, having this game available and having all of these games available is no easy feat. These are the type of things that could have absolutely 100% gone extinct to time if preservationists out there weren't buying up loads of different cell phones and then trying to figure out how to get those games off and emulating for everyone to enjoy. And I mean, honestly, that really is the most fun part about this, the fact that it's even possible in the first place, because these are games that you basically weren't guaranteed a chance to play, and now you can sit down and enjoy them all. And like I said, there is some different story beats here, some different elements, some different lore that Capcom's never put in a mainline game. And even though I don't think that any of these games are actually in the Resident Evil canon, so definitely don't think that it's basically changing the story, it is just kind of a fun experience to have. Classic tank controls, classic chunky polygons like on PlayStation 1, some really really good looking pre-rendered backgrounds, and just more Resident Evil or Biohazard goodness. That is always something that basically everyone would want to enjoy, and that's why I decided to make this video after doing the original video on the episodes being dumped. Leave me a comment down below and you tell me what's your favorite quote-unquote rare Resident Evil game. There's a lot of different options out there, so I would be curious. And again, if you want to play any of these games, the link to Keytie Launcher is down below, and if you want that setup guide, leave me a comment. But go play some new Resident Evil games you've never played today. Enjoy, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.